Hello, and a huge welcome to our session for April. I really hope the Easter break has treated you well and enjoying the sunny weather. Even though I wrote that yesterday and it's cloudy today, but hey ho. Let's hope the sun is going to come out for the upcoming long weekend. Anyway, as always, I hope you're all well, and it's lovely to see you all here. As I keep saying, our feedback from what we're doing still continues to be really positive, and our engagement way outside of our own region, is still widening. So on behalf of the branch and the wider CIPD, thank you for coming. We really do appreciate your feedback. And as I say every time, any idea for speakers or future topics, or even volunteers for speakers, please do reach out to us. Believe me, one of us will take you up on any of your ideas, and if you want to be a speaker as well. After today's session, you will be receiving an email with a SurveyMonkey link. It'll take a few minutes. It's about 6 or 7 questions. If you've got some time, your feedback is really, really appreciated. On to today's session. As per previous events, everybody is on mute, certainly to start with, and you cannot share your screen. And for the best viewer experience, I would recommend you put this into speaker mode on the PC, top right, thing that looks like a Rubik's Cube. Click on that and press on speaker. Now, today's session will be interactive as usual, and Alex will be asking you to ask and make comments in the chat window, as well as possibly at times coming off of mute to ask your questions and comment. Just to remind you, on the chat function, certainly again on the PC, at the bottom in the middle, there's a button that says chat. Open that and it'll open. We really do welcome your interaction, therefore please do ask and comment away. There will be some natural pauses. We'll answer some questions and address some comments then. Some of these questions you may find will be answered as we go along, and we'll certainly do our best towards the end of the session to answer the rest. Estimated time today, 50 minutes to an hour, and this really depends on your question and interactions. The event is being recorded, as is the thing has just told you, and the video as well as the handout will be available on the social media links, as well as the CIPD mailer this week. We've also saved the handout to Dropbox, and I'll share that link as we go along, so at least you've got something to take away. All of the links to where we're at in terms of social media, I'll also be putting those in the chat function as well. Now, before we get going, hello, Alex.
Hello.
Hello,
thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. Well, at least we know the tech is working, and we can see and hear you loud and clear. As per usual, now I am going to shirk my responsibilities as our host, as our speakers can do and do a much better job than I could possibly do. So on that note, Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Lee. Lovely to see you all this morning. I see some familiar faces. Hello. And some non-familiar faces too. Lovely to meet you virtually. My name's Alex. I'm from Flint. I have a background in HR with the last corporate organisation was an organisation called Miele. We made dishwashers, washing machines, etc. You'll hear something about them today. And I was, towards the latter part of my HR career, very much in a culture and change environment and role. And I subsequently moved into a customer experience director role to, I call it, put my money where my mouth was and create that change as a leader. And I think eventually that's what inspired me to set up Flint, was because creating change as a leader, it made me realise that actually it was more than mindset and beliefs and values and behaviours. And of course it's fully about that, but actually as a leader you have ways of making a difference in a very practical way, actually, processes, ways of working, communicating, and we're going to talk about all of those today. So we set up Flint to be a little bit different, a little bit more pragmatic, and we've been going, I think, for 7 or 8 years. A couple of my colleagues are here, they'll probably remind me. And we work with hugely diverse clients, helping them to be very practical around organisational change. So I'm going to kick us off and talk you through our agenda for today. I think many of you will have seen it at the registration. A little bit about how to determine what might need to change within your own culture. Most of our time spent today on very practical, tangible ways to impact culture and align your values to practices that your teams will feel and see and hear every day. How to deal with the people who get in your way. We won't spend much time with that, but every time we run webinars, people say, well, how do I deal with these people who've been here 20 years and they've seen it all, and they tell us that we can't change it. We're going to talk a little about that. And then at the end, we're just going to bring it back to that HR piece, really, and talk about the employee experience and that employee life cycle, and how to create rituals within that life cycle that support that culture. set up some rituals and allow you to have some fun with your culture and your employee brand. Okay, so firstly, just to think about what might need to change. Of course, you probably mainly know this. What we are helping you with today is putting some structure around what that might look like. Our experience shows us that people within a business really know what needs to change. Not just you, not just the exec team, but actually people in your frontline teams who are dealing with customers or stakeholders. So I know this isn't rocket science, but we define culture as how we do things around here. And the reason for that is it is the unwritten rules, the corporate memory, the things that people remember from 16 years ago, and rest assured they will. We will go out and do our audits in organisations and people say, but what about the time that Michael shouted at somebody? Really? It was 16 years ago? We've not seen behaviours like that in the organisation for that. Yeah, but I remember it from then. So it's very unwritten and it can become quite mythical. And that's why for us, it is about becoming quite clear on what you want that desired state and that culture to be, so that you can move away from those myths and those legends and move towards what you're trying to achieve. And our culture wheel is the way that we structure our approach to culture. This has been adapted from an academic model, so it's based in research, but we have got some Flint elements to it. And in particular, that very practical approach around things like ways of working, rituals and stories that are, we believe, fundamental to changing culture for people in your teams to buy into it. People who might not want to hear about a value or a behaviour or changing of a mindset, because, you know, to us that makes lots of sense. It doesn't to everybody, but actually asking them, well, if we made a change to this process that would mean that the customers wouldn't shout at you when you gave them that bit of feedback, would that make you feel more customer driven? Well, actually, yes, it would. So for us, it's far more than the way people feel about our business. It's about how every single thing you do is understood and communicated, visualized. We're very visual in what we do so that people can see very easily the way that we're manifesting that culture or that strategy. We do lots of work with clients who have beautifully articulated strategies, in particular in the NHS, 30, 40 pages long. They are plastered all over every agency website. But actually, if you're a community nurse with no laptop, you are unlikely to spend time reading that 30 to 40 page strategy. So what we are about is helping to translate what that means. And for us, having a positive, healthy culture is not just a nice to have. And I know that there's still some work. I know, you know, Lou and Lee will be aware of this in the CIPD around really getting to grips with the research and the evidence base behind it, but it is there. And even if you could say to me, actually, our organisation probably doesn't have a really healthy culture, but it's really very profitable, it might not be that is a sustainable model. So our wheel starts with clarity of purpose, and we're going to talk through each of these as we go through today. So I won't spend lots of time on them at the moment. But, you know, lots of research around how important it is that people know where they're going. We're going to give you some examples and case studies around that. Symbols, rituals, and stories. That is, you know, the lovely stuff you hear about when you read or listen to podcasts. We read one last week. Lucy's brilliant at sharing these, where an organisation has a red chair, and every time somebody's passed their probation or celebrates something, they sit in the red chair and they talk about that. I know. I think there's somebody online who may have also been in our Virgin community. Wonderful employee rituals to really support bringing that culture to life. Communication is fairly self-explanatory, but we're just going to talk through a structure of communication to help engage people. Measures and goals, kind of thing that you kind of think, really, should that be on a culture wheel? We're going to give you some examples as to why. What gets measured gets done. And if you, in particular, if you're going to link it to any kind of reward, if you're setting measures and goals for people that don't align to your wider culture, then we don't believe it will work. We're working with a trading organisation at the moment, and they have people who are very heavily recognised and rewarded by personal wealth on an individual basis. And whilst we don't believe that that changing the reward mechanism will change the culture, it will stop it getting in the way. And that's what we'll talk about. Values, again, fairly self-explanatory. But what we're going to talk about today is having a poster with your values on the wall is really lovely and it looks pretty, but it's simply not enough. And actually, if you don't do anything with that, just take the poster down and pretend that it doesn't exist. So we talk about some very pragmatic and practical ways of bringing that to life. And then finally, what needs to change in your way of working? So the best one for me on this is customer driven. We're working with a client at the moment and they have a customer driven value, and their customer services team say, well, finance don't have to provide a refund to that customer for 28 days. So it's my job to get customer satisfaction score of 90%, but actually when they need to refunds process, they might ring me 4 times and be screaming at me by the end of that 28 days. So please don't tell me that we're customer driven, because actually our processes and our approach to that customer doesn't make us customer driven. So, and for us at Flint, this is where we really engage people in culture, because if we're listening enough, and that really is the answer to this question about understanding what needs to change. It's really listening to your teams, in particular in this element of the wheel around what can change. If innovation is one of your values, then are we listening to ideas? Are we running innovation workshops? Do we have the kind of processes in place that allow us to look to being innovative? So big listening exercise here, understanding what needs to change. And of course, culture needs to be driven by the top, fully engage in that. But I guess at Flint, what we believe is that there are things that you can do, regardless of where you are in the organisation, that can align to that desired state. Okay, let's get a bit practical now. We're going to take each element of the wheel, or most of them, and we're going to talk about some case studies and some different approaches that we've had. And I guess, this is really about connecting what you are trying to achieve all the way through the organisation. And we're going to finish off with how we do that at an employee lifecycle level. So as we go through each element of the wheel, we're going to start with clarity and purpose. So many people we work with as we go out and we do our audit on each element of this culture wheel. And people will say, no, people really get where we're going. They understand our strategy. It's on the website. We sent an email, and one of our sites did a roadshow. And you go, great, really good start. But actually, in fact, we can't find any research to back this up. I was just about to say the research shows, and in fact, that's not true. We fundamentally believe, as do marketing experts, that you have to tell somebody something 7 times in order for them to really get it. We actually can't find any evidence base behind it, but we're sticking with it as one of our kind of fundamental principles. So this is really about continuing to get that reinforced message of what you're trying to achieve at a strategic, at a departmental, at an individual level out there. And once people understand the part that they play, they can move with pace. So if they understand that where they have permission, and people say that's a terrible word, Alex, you shouldn't use it. But actually, if people have clarity of what they're able to go and do without asking you, without moving into a complex or bureaucratic process, they will move faster through delivering for you. And one of the things we look to do at Flint is we often hear that people might understand the strategy at a kind of superficial or at a conceptual level. But what we as leaders are not always great at doing is translating what that strategy means into what Bob needs to do in finance, what Debbie needs to do in customer service. So we spend a lot of time with clients working kind of down that funnel of that clarity of purpose. And this is one example. I don't expect you to be able to read it. The content isn't relevant, but it is about just you being able to see the concept. That divisionally or at an organisational level, we've got clarity on what the pillars are. Is it, the quality of what we do? Is it access for customers into our organisation? And we have clear objectives behind what is expected of us at an organisational or a functional level. Subsequently, what does that mean that finance need to do? So finance probably need to move more quickly in terms of providing financial data so that we are able to impact decisions that are taken by that financial data earlier in the month, ready for the next month. How this particular team do it, they were the analysts. They need to assess the data partway through the month, start to look at the trends. I'm making this up, but you see where I'm going. And ultimately where we've got to with many, many clients is down to an individual level. And I'm going to show you this in another example later, which is an NHS example. And it really then allows people to understand the extent of the role that they play in order to achieve that strategy. So for us, it's a really kind of basic but quite important tool that individuals love, because they're able to see the part they play and they're able to move much more quickly in what they need to deliver. Values. So, love to know how many of you have values, and that would be my first question. And my second question would be, how many of you have values that are genuinely lived out? So I'd love you to comment on the chat. Lee has full permission to interrupt me if there's questions or anything important that comes up. Values is a big part of what we do, and actually for us at the moment with a lot of clients, it is what we're doing. But we have a really strong view that values should be, of course, partly aspirational, but equally something that can be clearly lived out and can be understood by employees within the organisation, and they can be reinforced for living them out. So, the customer service one is a good example. We did an audit for a big client recently, and they had plans to change their values, and in fact they've just done it, and we've just launched it. And one of the things that came out of the audit was, we say we're global, but actually we're very London centric. And I'm expected to be involved in everything, but I'm not invited to certain meetings. Many of the meetings aren't in my first language, so I feel anxious when I am asked a question. So we took that. One of their values became respect each other. The definitions and the discussions and the descriptors within that value were about really genuinely respecting the regions and the importance that they brought to the organisation as a whole. And to give you an example, we launched the values, and every single meeting that they have had so far, we have translated into Chinese, into Spanish. So Marianne and I ran the meeting with the Chinese team. We had everything translated into Chinese. We had an interpreter in there, and we used the Zoom interpretation function. And the impact on those individuals, and people had said to us, look, you need to understand, quite often the China team aren't quite as interactive. It's because it's not their first language. And in fact, it was the meeting that ran over because the team had so much to tell us, and they were so excited by the fact that, we had genuinely listened and we were involving them in a different way. So for us, values are very pragmatic. We work our way around the wheel. We look at what ways of working are obstacles for our customer value, for our transparency value, for our innovation value. And we make changes to those processes with those clients in order for those values to be real. And we generally go out and we ask people within the teams what is getting in their way of being customer driven. And they are the experts. They're the experts because they're engineers and they're speaking to customers, because they are customer service members and they are speaking to customers, and they know the answers. And by listening to what they say, it allows them to live the values in a different way. Before I pause, and I will in a moment, Lee, because I can see lots of chats, just to check if there's anything that you need from me. One of the ways we start is we have these beautiful handbooks, playbooks. So we quite often have kind of relatively low cost sort of information that comes out to people when we introduce it. We are very clear that playbooks and brochures do not live out values, but they are a really lovely starting point. They get amended and tweaked in a digital way for induction, so that you're constantly being able to introduce people to those values in induction. And then it allows us to work through the organisation and through the culture wheel to pick up on those values points. Lee, there's a natural pause in case there's anything you want to cover?
No, it's just some of the comments, no questions, but comments in there. And we've got, it is interesting. We have everything from, no, we don't, but the person's only just joined the team, so they're working on them, right
Great.
through to, yes, we have some great values, through to, yeah, we've got them, but are they really relevant? They've been in for 10 years, they need reviewing. So some interesting stuff in there.
Great. And interestingly, just on the reviewing one, that's where we started with this client. Is they came to us, they had this hugely ambitious strategy to grow, to diversify, and essentially, you know, their values just didn't match that excitement. And as we went through the audit, you know, the wording in the strategy was ambitious, it was innovative, passionate, entrepreneurial, and in fact, the values were quite staid. And the first thing that they did actually was to refresh those values. And because we did that in consultation, it allowed a much stronger level of buy-in. And then as we went through, we are now in the process of making changes all the way through the wheel to be clear on what those values mean. So the refreshing is a lovely thing to do. Even if you don't change them all, changing one or two, it just gives you another launch pad and gives you another kind of, you know, piece of momentum to keep it moving, really.
Tony's come in with one. I've just picked out on it. Actually, it's relatively, I suppose, simple, but it's care, create, and connect. These are considered and evidenced in the performance review process.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So we're going to talk about that at the end. So one of the things we almost always do with clients is connect the performance suite into the values. So that's brilliant. And we start conversations. So we usually put a conversation starter into that performance suite. That we have a launch today. I'm at a client site this morning, not in my own office, which caused some anxiety this morning. I had to get across central London, and all of that. All of those values connect into all of the way through that employee life cycle. So that's just brilliant. The other thing I love about what you've just said is that people will remember those. So, you know, from an occupational psychology perspective, they are easy hooks that people will hold on to. The ones we're launching today are team, trust and passion. Love it. Lucy always comes up with her ones from a previous organisation, you know, that are easy and, you know, people can hold on to them. Whereas sometimes we do work with organisations where there's 8 or 10 and there's loads of words. Let me tell you, no one's going to remember them in a year's time. Brilliant. So communication, fairly self-explanatory. I won't spend lots of time on it. It is that reinforcement of that message. So again, in psychology terms, going out with one message isn't enough. It's that constant reinforcement of the behaviour and of the mindsets. It's not dissimilar, and I'm conscious of being recorded. And I don't mean to be patronising, but in psychological terms, it's not dissimilar to having a toddler, which is that I make clarity of my message and then I keep reinforcing them when they do it well. And in psychological terms, it's very similar. So we do a lot of work on communications in as many different medias as possible. So today, for example, we have a global launch, we have a playbook, we have the same imagery, the same wording, the same messages put into a video. We have the same then that will go out in 2 weeks' time with frequently asked questions. So you're reusing that same information, the same imagery, the same wording, but you're doing it in different ways. You're cutting it up separately. It's going onto social media. It's going onto videos. It's blogs from the directors. And it's just as many different exciting ways as you can find to communicate. And one of the things that we find, and you can probably tell I'm fairly high energy, bordering on nauseating, some people might say, but it is this constant level of energy that is required. Quite often we're really good at that clarity of purpose or the values piece, and we have a really lovely launch. We've got one today, and then we're all going out this afternoon on team building and trust exercise. Lovely. But it doesn't go away in 4 weeks' time, or 8 weeks' time, or 8 months' time. It's this constant reinforcement of those messages. So communication is absolutely fundamental. But I just want to draw your attention to one thing that we do use with clients, which is communication kind of moving back into that ways of working and those rituals rather than that launch excitement piece. So again, Flint are very pragmatic. We're all about making sure that people engage with this on a very individual team level. So one way that we do this is we create the strategy that comes out of the clarity of purpose. So you go back to that sort of slide that you remember where you've got each of your objectives down to your individual level. We have a WAG, which is our weekly action group. People will get together with their team leaders and they'll talk through where they are on their individual and possibly at a team level. So one example was a crash repair company that we worked with. And this, in their WAG, what their objective, what they were trying to achieve was key to key. I will take the key off of the customer to repair the car and I get the key back to the customer as quickly as possible, ideally in a 5-day working day time frame. So in that weekly action group, what they talked about was, we're having a problem with Mercedes because we haven't got certain parts. So it's impacting our key to key objective and that impacts our cost. So that's the sort of thing then that they can talk through. They say, right, let's find parts from somewhere else. So you're kind of increasing your communication around the obstacles that you're facing. That moves into a MOM. Many of you will have these anyway, but what we suggest is that the backdrop to these meetings is that, what we call it a roadmap, or that, you know, that one pager that you see that's covered everybody's own objectives and what the team are trying to achieve. And here, this normally is an opportunity to say, we've had 3 of our WAGs now, and we still can't get the Mercedes parts. So actually, I'm now in a meeting with the managers, and I'm telling you that continues to be an obstacle for us achieving what we need to, both at a sort of strategic and a cultural level, because essentially people are feeling frustrated. Their bonus might be attached to that key-to-key measure. They can't get what they need, so it's impacting all of us. So that allows the managers to escalate that, contact the Mercedes account manager, for example. That then moves into a QAC, which is a quarterly action check, normally quite a high level, high energy meeting where everybody is talking through what they had to achieve this quarter and what they did and didn't. So you're starting to see what's on track and what's off track. If you remember that original slide, their quality and access, they were in boats. That was the way that they presented their visuals. And essentially it allows you to see out of the flotilla which boats are sailing away. See what they did. Brilliant. So quarterly action check, we called it Quackmas. And that would be with a wider group of people and really enable you to see, right, we need to move quickly. We're not achieving this. What are we going to do? So it brings you all together. And then your annual roadmap strategy. So you're taking then your 3 QAC updates into what needs to be achieved for next year. Quite an agile, fun way of communicating that keeps the information flowing, but it keeps the information flowing upwards from your employee voice. And when they are quite often the ones speaking to customers who can't get Mercedes parts, that is the kind of fundamental information you need to know whether your strategy and your cultural piece is moving quickly enough. So it's about keeping that employee voice through all of your comms. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. Lee, do shout me if you want me to stop.
You're all good.
Great. Okay. So measures and goals. Again, this is one that's really important to Flint. It's not always found in culture models. And it came to me when I was working for Miele, and we had gone out to all of the engineers and we'd said, customer is our new value. We knew that the customer service was going to differentiate our brand from many other brands who were doing well in the market. And we went out and said, ways of working, what's going to stop you from being customer focused? It was brilliant. The engineers said to us, got so many ideas. It's amazing. Let me tell you, Alex, I think one of the things that would help us be really much more customer focused is if the contact center could do the following 3 things. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Can they take the serial number from the machine so that I know which part to order? Because our clarity of purpose was first time fix. We wanted to fix the customer's machine the first time we got there. And we said, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. Well done. They said, the other thing that would be really helpful is if the contact centre can ask in central London or in cities, do we need a parking permit? Because quite often that might save me half an hour looking for parking, and the customer can give us the parking permit number, and it makes a massive difference to customers. Brilliant. So we go back to the contact centre. Contact centre say to us, can't do that. Well, why not? Seems to make perfect sense to us. Seems to be all about customer. And they said, because you bonus us on average handling time, the amount of time I take on the phone and how quickly I can get that customer off. Valid point. For me, it was this massive light bulb moment around, actually, our measures and goals are aligned to each function of the organisation, as opposed to the values or the strategy of the organisation horizontally. So we made this change whereby everybody was measured on what was right for the customer. So in this particular case, it was first time fix. In the crash repair company, it was key to key. And everybody's measures aligned. So we said to the contact centre, we actually don't mind how long you keep that customer on the phone, providing they don't call you back and we get a first time fix when the engineer gets to the home. And it was an absolute game changer. Of course, there's loads of logistical stuff that goes with that, how many people you need to answer those phones, etc. I'm not taking away from that, and that was my leadership issue. But it was a massive light bulb moment. And in terms of this very practical way of connecting culture to what you do, it was a really important one that doesn't necessarily get driven by a value. It gets driven by something really pragmatic in your organisation, but has a fundamental difference or impact on your cultural and strategic aims. So again, be really keen to know from any of you how, what your measures and goals are like, and whether, you think there's anything that can be changed. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving.
So Rich has just come in with your measures need to align with your values. For example, if one of the values is teamwork, then having individual KPIs is going to work against you. At Pure Planet, where Rich was, in the customer service area, we only had team goals. Yeah, lovely. I mean, I know Rich's work, and I think he's brilliant at this. So, I think that's a fab point. I think for us, the individual piece quite often, so we're working with one client, the launch today, and they've just connected this to their performance piece, which has gone on to their Bamboo HR. And actually on that, it allows them to share goals at an individual and team level. So it allows them to collaborate, even at a digital level. So yeah, really useful. Ways of working, probably one of our favourites, I think, because we were talking to a client recently where their teams were working in sewers, and it was about how they kept those teams moving and delivering what they needed to deliver. And we talked to them about the fact that actually writing pretty posters about mindsets and behavioural changes isn't necessarily what those guys need to know. It is, in fact, much more about how their day is made easier. That is how they might be able to more strongly focus on the customer, rather than just going to kind of think through my mindset this morning, and I'm going to take a moment to understand whether I'm in a customer-driven mood. And the really lovely example I want to give you here is one that, again, had a massive impact on me. So that when I said sewers, I did actually mean these were people who were that was their business, was that they were working, their teams were working in the sewers. It was a client we had a conversation with recently. So in terms of ways of working, the example I want to give you is an NHS trust that we did some work with. And they had a real struggle reducing infections. And so we went out to that organisation, and rather than putting more people and more money into the infection control team, we went out to workshops in the wider organisation. So we spoke to porters, cleaners, microbiologists, nurses, community nurses, and we said, look, you are the experts here. Help us to reduce infections. And they came up with the most overwhelming number of ideas, none of which
is rocket science. Sometimes I get off of these webinars or these presentations, people say, it's not really rocket science, Alex. No, it's not. But in fact, sometimes it's actually really quite simple. One of the ladies said to me, I'm a cleaner. I get 45 minutes to turn around a bed. But if somebody who's been in that bed before me had MRSA, it takes 2 hours for the chemical to work. So I miss my target every single time if I'm prepared to stick my neck out and accept that that's going to take me 2 hours to remove the MRSA. We took that back up to the organisation, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's massive. We need to just change the 2 hours from 45 minutes to 2 hours. The community nurse said on their fit to fly form, that's when you take somebody out of an acute hospital into a community environment. There was no infection control on the handover. So they had no idea that those people had come from an acute ward and had MRSA. 73 ideas. We managed to push many of them forward. And this is where we really did have individual, went down into individual objectives, because the porters needed to be really clear, actually, they needed to wipe down every time. So it wasn't necessarily that was a different to the individual next to them, but they had that as a team goal, but it was given to them as an individual objective. And it aligned across the piece. And by the following March, they've never seen so few infections in the trust. And they, hugely powerful. A little bit conscious of my time. Any questions on any of that practical piece?
Not this far, Alex, no.
Great, okay. So I've kind of worked our way through the wheel, trying to give you some sort of very practical, tangible tips on ways that any of us can impact culture through those elements of the wheel. Don't have huge amounts of time today. We're very happy to talk either at the end or indeed at any other point to answer any questions that come from that. Brief piece on people who get in your way. So almost every time we do this, people will say, I agree with what you're saying, Alex, but actually, we've got kind of quite an influential group of people in our organisation who have been here a long time and who say, tried this 20 years ago, it didn't work. Well, we're never going to be able to do that. And that's because the technical piece of C plus Y does this. And it happens a lot. And I guess we just wanted to give you some tips because people regularly ask us. So when you do get those people, our first tip is to be really clear. This is our Flint team being purposely obstacle-ish. We do say, firstly, be really clear on your values and behaviours. And what we mean by that is, rather than just saying, well, we're customer-driven, be clear on the effective and ineffective behaviours underneath that. So what do we actually mean by customer-driven, or what do we actually mean by transparent? We have one recently, and it's passion. And in a global team, we have a team from a Latin American culture and a team from other cultures in the world, and you also have to overlay cultural norms into some of those values and behaviours. So it's a complex, nuanced piece, but be really clear on what you mean, because what that allows you to do is reinforce the people who are living out that in a way that you want them to, and also to call out those who don't in an appropriate way, because you've got your examples of what that looks like. Help people understand what it means. And so to give you an example with the passion thing, we're running workshops that help on that cultural piece, that help people understand that actually in a Latin American culture where it's really passionate and actually we're shouting, that feels sometimes quite different in other Asian cultures, for example. So helping people to be clear on what that means is really useful. Reinforce and celebrate when people do it well, so that people are able to see those reinforcements and they're able to see what good looks like. We do suggest that you embrace the people who are negative if you can, and bring them in. In Mila we had a core group, we called them, and that meant that all the ideas that came through, like the ideas from the NHS group, they had to go through this core team, and they all had sort of technical experts in it, and we suggested that, is that going to work? Can we make that work? And where you've got those people who are longer serving and they are more entrenched, we brought them in and said, look, you're such an expert in this, help us. And then that allowed us to coach them. So embrace them where possible. In the launch that we're doing this afternoon, they have values ambassadors. So you're pushing some of that. It's almost like, that pyramid marketing model where you're pushing your values ambassadors into the organization. So it's not just a top down piece. And the one point I haven't put on the end of here, but ultimately, if you can't change the people, sometimes you've got to change the people. And that's your kind of worst case scenario. Okay. The final piece from me, really with a kind of HR focus, is ensuring that culture is reflected in all areas of the employee experience, creating rituals that live out your culture and ideally set you apart as a kind of fun place to be. So this is one client's employee life cycle. They obviously all look different. But essentially, we took the values of this organisation and we ensured that they were visible all the way through the employee life cycle. So for attraction, we had videos made by the teams talking about what good looked like. So one of their values was collaboration. They were a trading organisation, traditionally was very individualistic, very siloed, very focused on personal wealth. And there's lots of barriers for women entering organisations like that. And there's lots of research that shows that women, they want to be in sometimes more of a collaborative environment. So we made videos and we called it, trading is a team sport. And we showed the collaboration initiatives and interventions that we were running. So right up at that attraction point, we had really clear views of how our culture was lived out and what our values meant. Obviously in recruitment and selection, in the talent piece, our questions were driven around those values so that we had values-based descriptions and questions. In induction, they had their playbook type, so it went out with contracts, and then they were able to answer questions. Then they had a buddy who talks them through it. Their manager has a conversation starter that kicks them off around values. Reward, recognition, and comp is a really interesting one. We do work with clients where they do directly connect their reward to values. I know there will be lots of comments and questions, and some of you will agree with it and some of you won't. We don't necessarily believe that changing the reward process will impact culture on its own, but we do believe that if it's not aligned, it will not allow you to fully live out the culture that you want and need. Progression and performance, just as one of you so beautifully said earlier, we always link the values into the performance suite. Whether you end up linking that to reward or not, it allows those conversations to happen. Environment and structure. So I do some board assessment work, and I was in with a client assessing a board last week, and they are an education establishment, and there was A-level work all around the room. Students were updating around their own experiences. So, it's a minor point, but it brings the culture into the environment and the structure as well. If you're looking to be really transparent and agile, but you've got 8 layers of management, you might need to think, A, whether that's right for you, and B, whether, you can find interventions or processes that allow a very, very swift move of information. And then obviously into your exit piece. And for us, this is about creating joined up interventions that work together to build the culture with very clear measures for the organisation. Any questions on any of that?
Gina's come in. In the small consultancy I work at, every month we are all invited to complete an employee pulse check with questions such as, what's your biggest achievement this month? What are your challenges? What could the company do to make your job easier, etc.? Things dealt with, we also have a monthly town hall meeting where we get an overview of the bigger picture and company plans, which is useful when you're so focused on your own department.
Love it. Very forward thinking, brilliant, exactly the right thing. I think sometimes there can be a concern that they have to be followed up on. So we have seen some of that with clients where maybe 6 months down the line, they've been asked every month, but then nothing's been actioned as a result. So again, the action focus is really relevant, but I love that. Thank you. It's absolutely brilliant. And really is a ritual, you know, it's the kind of thing you're going to remember wherever you go in your career. Marianne, Lucy and I have worked together for a long time. And the first organisation we ever worked for about 25 years ago had rituals that we still talk about now, that we still remember now. And they are, you know, they're stuff that sits with you. It was a fantastic, very forward-thinking organisation. And yeah, great example. Thank you. Okay.
There isn't anything else in there at the moment.
Great.
So please continue, Alex.
So, well, I'm kind of all perfect for time, so that's good. So if there's anything else just after I finish this, then that's great. So I guess for us to conclude, we believe you really can influence your culture wherever you are within that organisation with clear, purposeful interventions. They don't have to be high cost. Quite often people think about change or culture as really kind of high cost, radical, must come from the top. And of course, we absolutely believe that it needs to come from the top. But I guess the point is sometimes people, again, a question that almost always comes to us is, you know, we've got 2 or 3 leaders who just don't buy into this. You know, how do we get past them? And I guess the point is keep going. You know, as long as you're aligning to the desired state, you're making a difference. Ask your people what needs to change. It is the most powerful thing we do. So we go into organizations almost always as a first point of contact with our change audit, and we ask people from all across the organization about where they stand in each of the culture wheel elements, and we are blown away every time with the level of information that they have and the answers that they have. It's incredibly empowering. So if you get the chance to do it, please do. Use all elements of your employee life cycle. We've heard some great examples today. Whether it be the measures and goals that, you know, Pure Planet, or whether it be the 3 kind of key care, create, forgive me that I can't remember the last one. You know, it's those kind of things that you can do in quite a fun way at all elements of your life cycle. And that's how you start to reinforce that culture. Embrace your naysayers where you can, get them on side. Generally, we have found that if we do enough of that, you know, let me embrace you, let me bring you into this, you're such a great level of knowledge, we can't do this without you, that generally people go, oh, okay, that's, you know, it sounds quite exciting. However, fully acknowledging that if your ongoing effort isn't rewarded, you may need to change your people or provide what we call some radical candor. That is me done. Thank you so much for listening. We would love to keep talking. We share lots on LinkedIn and we would love you to join us. Or please do contact us if you want to just talk through any elements of your current culture and any questions that you have. Thank you.
Lovely stuff. Thanks ever so much for that, Alex. What I've done is the handout from today. It is on a Dropbox link. I've posted that link as well as Alex's LinkedIn and the web address into the chat function as well. Alex, we had a question come in from Sam. How do we keep HR aligned, as sometimes every part of HR wants to make its mark and join up is so difficult, rather a massive amount of initiatives?
Yes, I think that is really, really fair. And again, I think as an HR professional, I always found that I was spending so much time supporting other people's strategies that we didn't always spend a huge amount of time focusing on our own HR. So in terms of that kind of horizontal planning, I would recommend spending as much time as possible planning as an HR team so that you get really, really clear on the number of initiatives and how you reinforce those same messages. IT is another brilliant example. We do a lot of what we call speed dating. So we take organizational strategies and ask each function what they need to achieve this year. And quite often out of that drops 83 IT initiatives and 62 HR initiatives. And we only have the cost and the resource to do 6 of each. So it really forces you then to say, what do HR need to do? What are our priorities? How do we get permission to be clear that that's what we're going to achieve this year, and we're going to do it brilliantly, and that's how we're then going to get the kudos that we very clearly deserve as a function, rather than 62 initiatives done in different areas that really push different messages, whether subliminal or conscious. So plan across the horizontal, agree to do less. Even if your initiatives need to be slightly different for separate functions or countries, it's the same, ultimately it's the same approach. I hope that helps.
No, lovely. And Rich has come in. What's your top tips for maintaining your culture in this world of remote and hybrid working?
Yes, again, a question that we do get asked every single time. And, to be honest, I think Rich has probably, got some brilliant ideas on this as well. But I think for us, it's the real focus on the rituals. So if you go back into the culture wheel, it's a focus on what those rituals look like. And it is working through those rituals in a way that allows you to support both hybrid and remote. So in one part of, one client that we're doing this for today, we have purposely gone with a 1:30 session that covers every time zone and brings in the global element, because what that allows us to do is because we were going to be remote anyway, we were going to be hybrid anyway, we've said, let's bring the whole world. And, that has now created this new ritual where every quarter we will have these new global hybrid sessions, which they've never done before because they felt a bit clunky and you couldn't always see everybody. We're then running breakout rooms across that. So there'll be some in London, there'll be some in Miami, and then there'll be some virtual breakout rooms. And we will then take that feedback. There is a nominated facilitator in each of those breakout rooms so that we can feed that back. So we're saying to them, we can't beat them, join them. We're going to be hybrid. Let's be really overt about that and create rituals that support it. I will let you know how it goes this afternoon. It's the first one they've ever done. And then each function has their own event this afternoon. So one of them is doing axe throwing. I'd like to be really clear, for my own insurance purposes, that was not my idea, Your Honour. And each of them have got their own session that they're running in their own country, and where people are remote, we have given them a voucher to buy themselves dinner with their families, so that we are, trying to run that whole kind of being as close as possible, but really acknowledging that that's what our future looks like. So embracing it and loving it.
Fabulous. Axe throwing. Yeah.
It's the sort of thing in HR that you're like, really? There's an escape room down the road. Can we not do that? No, we've done that. We've done escape. Oh my God.
I'll fully get you on that. I don't think we've had any more comments or questions come in, but what I was going to say, if there are any that come through as I'm just doing the close now, then more than happy to address those. But Alex, some really great stuff there, and I think we can probably all agree that everybody is going to be able to take something away from this. So thank you for coming to present it.
Thanks for having me all.
You are more than welcome. As mentioned earlier, the link to the recording today, as well as the handout, will go out on the social media sites. It'll also go out on the Sunday mailer from CIPD. I've put all the links to everything in terms of where you can find us, our LinkedIn, Facebook, so on and so forth. Everything is there. And of course, we can be contacted on any of these media. As already mentioned, any feedback, ideas, do please reach out to us. And like I said, again, if you're interested in becoming a member of the committee, do come and talk to us. And we'll just go back to that feedback piece. If you do have some time to complete the Survey Monkey, please do. This is your CIPD at the end of the day, and we're trying to do stuff that is relevant to all of you. I need to just put a piece in there around our mentoring scheme. We're really desperate for mentors. If this is something that you could commit some time to, certainly from our chartered members and fellows, do come and talk to us. Our next events, early next month on the 5th of May, we're actually turning our attention to our student population. We're hosting our very first student networking event. Students, please come and join us. This is on Thursday the 5th of May at 6 p.m. We're going back to face-to-face on the 11th of May at the Swindon Marriott. This is a 9 o'clock event presented by Roydswithy King. Not just your usual employment law update, because we've got a flexible working panel discussion with 4 local HRDs as well. So please come and join us. Just to mention the CIPD member benefits, I've put the YouTube video into the chat function as well. And once again, folks, just a reminder about the SurveyMonkey link. Thank you for joining. Have a good rest of your week, and of course the upcoming bank holiday weekend. And we look forward to seeing you soon. We're going to hang on a little bit for the purposes of the recording. I'm going to stop this now, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.